Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird. Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Episode 276, Mandela Effect, the movie. Now, we are here with the people behind the movie. That is writer Stefan Schlachtenhaufen and director David Guy Levy. And as well as we are joined by my sister from MilwaukeeGhost.com, Allison Jornlin. But California gentlemen, how are you enjoying the wonderful weather while we're freezing our junk off here?
Well, actually, it's pouring rain here, and it's going to be raining and cold for the next week or so. So usually we have it a lot better than you guys. And I know because I'm from Wisconsin.
Oh,
but,
wow.
It's a little chilly right now.
All right. Well, good. You deserve it. No, but I want to congratulate you guys on the premiere of the film, The Mandela Effect.
The Otherworld Film Festival. Is there any relation to you guys? Probably not.
Oh, no. Unfortunately, we're not big enough to have our own film festival yet, but just give us a couple of years and some funding. We'll see what happens.
Well, the Other Worlds Festival was the first time it showed publicly, but really the big premiere is coming up next week here in Los Angeles.
If you're
Terrific.
in LA, if you're in Los Angeles, we're doing 2 nights of screenings that we'll all attend at the theater it's playing at. And there's still tickets left to the Saturday show. So if you get on our social media, you can find a link to that.
So just wondering in the beginning, so we've talked about the Mandela Effect before in the podcast, and to explain it to people, it's the idea that when you remember something in the past, the memory is almost what you remember in the past isn't necessarily how it actually happened. So the Mandela Effect comes from this woman, Fiona Broome, and she remembered that Nelson Mandela didn't make it out of prison, and in 1994, but that he died in the South African prison. And so this idea, when Nelson Mandela actually died in our present reality, people were saying that, like, I remember Nelson Mandela dying back in the day. So how does that jibe with the news report I just saw?
Yeah, she was like at a conference, and there's like a lot of people around her when he passed away in, at the more updated version of reality, the one we all know now. And she was with like a bunch of people, and they were all confused, and they all sort of collectively called it the Mandela Effect. And then she started sort of, I guess, putting a pinpoint on this phenomenon, which I'm sure probably existed before then. But
yeah, cataloging other instances. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my own life, I mean, the whole Berenstein or Stein and Stain Bears, I mean, that one does it for me. I'm
that's
like,
what got me.
I know it was
Yeah.
I know it was Stein, or it was not Stain. It was definitely not Stain.
Yeah.
I always pronounced it Berenstein, like Frankenstein.
Yeah,
or
my
whatever,
wife my wife says Steen. I always said Stein.
But it's definitely not Stain.
But definitely not. No one agrees on Stain.
Yeah, that's a really weird one because it's so like, it doesn't seem to matter. It's one of those tiny little details, but it really gets in there because you're like, no, I clearly remember because I was like, are these Jewish bears?
Right.
This is what I was.
When I first heard about him, that was the one that hooked me into the whole thing. I was with Stefan's brother-in-law, who I went to film school with. His name's Trevor, and we were sitting having lunch, and he just said, the Berenstein Bears, and I said, oh yeah, of course. He's like, it's called the Berenstain Bears, and I was like, what? And that just was rabbit hole opened.
Yeah, I mean, it's for something so small like that, seemingly insignificant, makes you question your whole reality.
So what got you guys interested in making a movie about it? Because it's one thing to, take a traditional like paranormal trope, like vampires or werewolves, or stuff that people kind of understand because they've been inundated with their entire lives, and then say like, okay, we're going to pick this newer topic and try to make a movie about it? Like, what was the impetus behind that?
Well, I think maybe that lunch with Trevor, because then I think I called Stefan pretty quickly after that. And I was like, have you heard of this thing? We should be talking about this. And then I think, obviously we all grew up with really interesting movies like The Matrix, and there's a Fassbinder movie called World on a Wire, which once I started going down this rabbit hole with Stefan, we both started watching too, because it's about living in a simulation. But I was looking at simulation theory just randomly at the same time as Mandela came around. So when we were looking at, ways to approach the material, the angle that maybe third of the theories are sort of simulation related, I think that's what interested us the most was, that scientific side of it, as opposed to maybe more of a stretch to the theories that stretch a little further into maybe fantasy, And
I think at that time it was right around the 2016 election, and there was a lot of conversations being had about around fake news. Yeah, I mean it was definitely in the zeitgeist, not just as an internet meme, but thematically we're sort of at this crossroads where reality can be manipulated. Our technology is starting to reach that point where people can create artificial shifts in how things are perceived, or can exploit people to question reality on a mass scale.
How would something like this happen if it wasn't a scientist wanting to gather data? Because it's like there's no logic to a lot of it. So it just seems like, And I think there's also two ways to approach it, too. Like there's that public shared reality that we all have, like when Trump got elected. But then how do you really have a character that you can relate to if it's sort of more external than that? So interestingly enough, like my wife got cancer, and then a few months later, Stefan's dad got cancer, and like everything in our personal lives too was just like intense. And so, like when that happened, you have then your personal life not making sense. And I think we definitely found that having a character with his own personal grief that, was relating to the public thing with these more broader pop culture references, but then also having personal memories with someone they care about that were being changed because of that was sort of our angle into the story.
There's a couple of things I want to kind of expound upon there. Number one, that idea of, so we have these shared Mandela effects with all these other kinds of people, other people with like, the Berenstain, like everyone here in this podcast right now had that experience with the Berenstain Bears.
Oh,
They're like,
yeah.
What? Stain? Get you leave here. Like that's fighting words. And then there's personal things. Like you were saying, that the way we remember things ourselves, like especially the painful stuff. And that's kind of, the emotional hook of the film is around a father who has a very great loss happen to him. And then when all these different things in reality start shifting around him, it's the idea of, can he regain what he's lost? And I think that's a very powerful hook, because it takes something silly like the Berenstain Bears, or we can go on some of the Easter eggs that you guys put in the movie of all, like you guys hit almost all of the ones out there of the shared Mandela effects that people have experienced.
And even like, if not in your face, definitely subtly, there's some stuff that if you go, oh wait, they did do that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we wanted to pay homage to all those that people have an attachment to. But we knew that wouldn't sustain a movie onto itself. And then we also decided early on we didn't want this to be like a spy thriller. So we kind of pulled everything back to a smaller story about this family, and then applied these bigger ideas to that sort of tragic story.
And because it can be on a huge level. When you were talking about reality shifts, I just saw a deep fake made by MIT this week. And it was Richard Nixon saying that the astronauts on the moon had to be left behind because of And so it was this idea of like they created a deep fake of Richard Nixon, saying that Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong didn't make it home from the moon, and it looks awesome. It looks awesome. It looks like a late 1960s news video, and it sounds like Richard Nixon, and it looks like Richard Nixon saying it, and you're just saying, they're going, well, now that I've seen, this is the kind of stuff that can get into people's memories for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And so the Mandela effect does suggest something that I guess I hadn't thought of on a deeper level, but people using shifts in reality to kind of emotionally manipulate humans and votes and opinion and all those kind of things that can have a big effect on our regular reality. So I think it's interesting that you used the 2016 election as a kind of a point of what that's made was inspiration for the film, because when something so unexpected happens, like Donald Trump becoming, like the guy from The Apprentice becoming the president of the United States, something, wherever you are politically, it doesn't matter. Nobody saw that coming. Not even Donald
Not
Trump.
even his supporters saw that coming. Yeah.
I've got to say, as a paranormal researcher, that's the one thing I've got to cite, which if there's anything that's ever happened to me, that's the one thing where the silver lining is that it really makes me believe in the paranormal. I'm like, if that can happen, anything can happen.
That's right. Set your mind to it, kids. Anybody can do it. And but using that idea though, because if reality can be so affected, then the Mandela effect might have far more reaching implications than just having it be something silly like Luke, I am your father kind of thing. And which, you guys got that scene in the movie. Did you have to beg George Lucas, go to the Star Wars ranch and fall to your knees and be like, George, please let us use some, how do you get Star Wars footage in a real movie?
I was like, George, come on, George. No, we were very careful with how we presented these different things in the movie so that they would be legally covered by fair use law. And so we worked with specialized attorneys in fair use law who then, will make sure that you fall under it. And there was moments when we wrote stuff or shot stuff where they said, this doesn't work anymore. You have to rethink how you present this so that it does fall under fair use law. And then they write you in a letter. And since they're sort of established long-term people in the industry, an insurance company will give you the insurance you need to release your movie. And so if they do have a problem with it, it won't cost you anything to talk about it in court. So that's sort of how a lot of people
behind the scenes.
I find that fascinating.
Escape from Tomorrow was that Disney movie a few years ago where the people shot the whole movie at Disneyland. The same lawyers did that, and Super Size Me and Room 237 was all fair use. And that's all the same attorney, like Michael Donaldson, who just does this. And so, yeah, we used them. And thankfully the film has that bigger feeling of connecting with the world we were all sharing together,
But it was critical that those pieces were part of the public discourse. We couldn't, there's no way you just pull any moment from Star Wars. It was
so
a specific
commentary moment. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, because I'm sitting there going what did they have to do? Did they have to bribe Mickey Mouse? Or how do you get Star Wars footage in your movie? So that's cool.
If this was a studio film, it might have been harder because then you have the in-house lawyers going, this makes us nervous. But as an indie film, we don't have anyone sort of telling us not to do stuff. So you sort of get to take risks you couldn't do if it was a bigger movie.
Well, an indie film, though, with a great cast. And when I was looking over the cast, I'm like, okay, they got Clark Peters from The Wire. Well, all right. Now, that's, and I know this may not be particularly paranormal unless, how did you get him in the movie? Did you read the script? He's like, this is great.
I was like, Clark.
George said to give you a call.
No, he was on a short list of people we were interested in. Someone who just feels wise and someone who could also play a character who was a little broken, as we sort of, as people will see in the movie. He's got his own life stuff that he's been dealing with. But so do we take him seriously or not? Is he helping Brendan or putting him further down the wrong path? It's sort of all a question. And he was one of these actors who's just presence without direction, already kind of can do that. And as Lester Freeman on The Wire, he was this person you could always look up to. And then in his other work too, he just has this wiseness to him. And even in real life, he's just a very...
Oh yeah. He's got a lot of gravitas.
He's a lot like that. Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is why Gravitas Ventures is distributing the movie, because they saw Gravitas.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then,
Synchronicities, dudes.
Well, he also portrayed Mandela in an earlier project.
I didn't realize that
ago, so there's like this weird...
after we cast him.
Yeah.
But that is a cool...
Oh.
But no,
maybe he thought, maybe when he read the script, he's like, it's a Nelson Mandela bio. That sounds great.
We went to him, and the thing is, he loves existential thinking. Oh, he really is a big thinker. And there's YouTube videos I found of him talking about different, just heady ideas and philosophies. And you could tell he just likes talking and thinking about things in this realm. So it was just the material. We were lucky that he read it and said, "Oh, this is cool. If I can make the time." And we had to do some creative scheduling because he had some other shows, but he sort of made the time and went out of his way to make sure he could make it work. And it was kind of thrilling because, he didn't need to, but he did.
Well, his presence certainly adds, like you said, the gravitas to the film, and his character is somebody that needs to be it could come off as a mad scientist right quick, right? So somebody who doesn't have that kind of presence could make the role less majestic and more, more not necessarily laughable, but with a crazy glint, which that would move the film in a different direction, I think.
And it just trailer responses. Like, I'll get online, I'll look at people reacting to the trailer. Like, that's a thing now. There's trailer reaction people. And
welcome to the future. It sucks.
Right. And a lot of people, I think he's sort of helping shape their perception of what this film might be, because he has his impact immediately on people when they see him. So it's kind of perfect, because if we had someone who just wasn't as interesting or couldn't hold the camera's gaze, it would have been a different movie.
Well, and like you were saying that Clark Peters might be open to talking about the big questions and philosophical ideas and stuff. As you guys have worked in paranormal reality TV before. So is that something that you have had a natural affinity for, or were you just I need rent?
We did not get to pay our rent with this movie, unfortunately.
But I work a lot in documentary television, not so much reality, but a lot of the stuff I've worked on is crossed over into either paranormal or cryptozoological or sort of big concept, like what if science shows, like Life After People and things like that. I've always been, David and I've both been sci-fi and horror genre fans for a long time. Our first project together was a horror film. I think that we both share an appreciation and an interest in those genres and those fields of study, frankly. I mean, when even on a folkloric level, I really love jumping into a research project for one of these shows, and it certainly helped influence some of what we did in this. Just in finding different points of view and different stories and applying that to our story.
Well, what I thought was cool was that it does go deeper than just the Mandela effect. Because I was like, well, how are they going to make a movie about this? And I'm watching. All I could think of was that there was a new Twilight Zone episode. If you remember, in the 1980s, they did a Twilight Zone, and a lot of cool directors did. Like Wes Craven did episodes. Toby Hooper did episodes, and they had a specific new Twilight Zone that was about a guy who was specifically, he was really particular about language. And so he was very snobby about his language. And then what was happening is that language was reframing around him. Language was shifting, so that instead of the word lunch, the word dinosaur now meant lunch kind of thing. And so in the end of it, he has to relearn language from his daughter, who's just learning how to read and speak. And then he's got to relearn how to read and everything. And that's his comeuppance for being such a word snob. Or I mean, the writer must have had a horrible English teacher or something like that he wanted to take revenge on for that particular episode. And so that's what I was kind of thinking. I was like, oh, this Mandela Effect movie is going to be like this Twilight Zone movie, but for an hour and a half. But then you guys took it into a completely different, like, paranormal idea, and the idea of the life as a simulation. Before you mentioned The Matrix. There's always the 13th Floor, which is the simulation movie that everybody forgets about.
Everyone keeps talking about that, and I wish no one ever brought it up to me while we were shooting. I wish I'd watched it for some influence. I'm gonna have to watch it. I've heard that title a lot lately. Yeah,
and then there's Dark City.
Dark City, I remember. Yeah,
Dark City was huge for me.
It's all those had like a lot of stylistic similarities to The Matrix, even the ones that came before The Matrix. But it kind of got all. It's like The Matrix sort of steamrolled those other films, and they kind of got clumped together. And I don't want to say forgotten, but definitely as time goes on, more and more overlooked.
Well, they definitely forgot the 13th Floor.
Yeah,
nobody's talking about that today.
And that was like the same time as The Matrix, right? That was like the same.
That's
year.
what I mean. They just
same year, yeah.
So
Matrix
they just got second fiddle to The Matrix. Yeah.
Now, when you guys were doing research on the idea of the Mandela effect and of the universe perhaps being some kind of simulation, how far did you get into the weeds when it came to like the different people that have been paranormal, like writing about this in the paranormal field for a while?
It's pretty easy to say that, and this might offend some people who are more sensitive to different opinions. Like I've noticed that in the Mandela effect community, who sometimes self-labeled as the affected, people don't like to hear your opinion because it might not match theirs, and then they get sort of sensitive about it. But without trying to piss off people, I can easily look at Mandela effects and explain them to myself. Like the Monopoly Man versus the Peanut Man. And how we could easily meld those memories. Our memories are very fluid. But when you start thinking about those are flags that draw you to bigger ideas like simulation theories, then it's harder when science and smart debate comes into it. It's hard to sometimes explain it. And there was one moment in the rabbit hole when there's this guy on a panel, Neil deGrasse Tyson, called Dr. James Gates. And I don't know if you're familiar with him. And there's a clip of this in the movie. It's brief. But he works on supersymmetry, which is like a branch of physics. And he discovered what he describes as what appears to resemble computer code called error-correcting codes embedded in equations of supersymmetry that describe fundamental particles. And, and they resemble what programmers use in browser windows, and computing. And the fact that the building blocks of life resemble the building blocks of computing is just something that makes the emoji with the head exploding, the most used one I use now, because it's just like, how do you then turn that off and try to be like, oh, well, that's just, you really start to go like, oh, there's really something to this. And then when you think about the mathematical likelihoods of it being a simulation being so exponentially greater than it not, like if you look at Nick Bostrom's work and his hypothesis on simulation theory, it's so much more likely that we are that, however, I still feel heartburn and I still like hurt myself and I feel very physical and alive, but, and that's how I try to keep myself from going insane. But, when you look at these ideas, it's hard to argue them. And a lot of people just don't argue them,
So Dave got really deep into the weeds, Mike, to answer your question. I was always, yeah. I mean, I think we always wanted to remember that we still would have an audience that might be watching this and being introduced to some of these ideas for the first time. So it was always a matter of sort of bringing the story back to these people and something more relatable, but all along influenced by these bigger concepts. But it wouldn't, it just wouldn't be a film. You couldn't sustain it with just presenting one idea after another. It had to be this emotional journey.
It's sort of like the film is now a gateway to people to finish the movie and then go look into stuff. Like we've shown you little breadcrumbs. Now go down your own little rabbit hole, talk about it with your friends and family after watching it. But these ideas are out there, and now you might be aware that that's a way to kill some time.
So you're really thinking of it as a way to, motivate people to actually look into the phenomenon for themselves.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think so. I think the idea has always been like, even if they like the movie or don't, I think the thing we're hoping to get out of it is a conversation, that it's not a movie that's forgotten. Like I go see movies and I've forgotten it by the time I get home and it doesn't pop into my head again. But, like this movie or not, I think when you get home, it's going to pop into your head and you're going to have more questions and you're going to want to spend some time exploring those ideas.
Well, and as we're talking about exploring big picture ideas, breaking that down, there's the emotional element, which, drives a narrative is, often is going to be something that happens to someone, and then that's what kind of sets it off. And of course, this movie has what happens to the main character that kind of sets him off. But when you guys are trying to explain big ideas to non-technical viewers, did you find yourself in the creation process or the writing and the rewriting process, like going through and going, okay, too nerdy, too weird, but there's certain things that you had in the original drafts of the script that you're like, hold on, this part puts the audience to sleep. Was there anything in particular in trying to express those big picture ideas that you had to go back and like rewrite to kind of simplify them?
Well, there were like concepts that we thought worked with the material, and we maybe tried to see ways to get them in there. And then we're just like, it's not necessary. This is just fat that we don't need.
Sometimes it wasn't in the writing process. You'd realize it on set. You'd hear the actors say a certain line, and it's like, this isn't really needed. We understand. We don't want to have to spell everything out. So sometimes just seeing it, the subtext in the performance might bring something out.
Like quantum entanglement and Schrodinger's cat were big things for sort of just the ideas behind how, the universe might work in my head too. And then I was, you look at the material and you're like, yeah, but that doesn't help the story we're telling. So, maybe you just get a frame of a Schrodinger cat on this computer, but that's all you get into the movie.
And right, which is obviously when you're getting into the because quantum physics is always people use that as like a word for God now. They'll be like, well, obviously this is true because, quantum physics. And you're like, hold on. I mean, that's the ultimate, Deus ex machina or whatever.
Right.
Like, well,
that's the shorthand.
Einstein believed it. So that's it. Spooky action at a distance. Movie's over, pal.
It's great for sci-fi films. I'll tell you. It explains a lot.
And so, one thing I'm interested though is that, as you said, you guys always had an affinity for supernatural and horror, and now you're coming in to create a fictional narrative based on a modern paranormal topic. Have you guys ever had a paranormal experience? Did you guys have something in general that you're like, well, I've seen something weird?
Dave, you want to go?
No, I was going to say you go. I have to think about it. You order your dinner first. Looking at the menu.
I haven't. I haven't had an easily identifiable paranormal experience. Though I will say, many times in my childhood, growing up in the woods of north central Wisconsin, there are times where there's just especially at night, especially crossing from our bunkhouse to my grandparents' house late at night, where there's some sort of presence, something, and I don't know if it's just the environment and just your imagination, but I have had that feeling of being watched and feeling vulnerable in a place that is secluded or remote.
That was just me, buddy. That was
Oh yeah, okay.
Just
Then I
dude.
feel a lot better now. But yeah, so I'm open minded to it, and I love talking to people that have had those experiences, and there's almost this hope that we discover something tangible, or that I can experience something tangible. That's yeah,
probably why we look at this genre. It's because like we want that. And that's why movies like Fire in the Sky scare the shit out of you, even though they're really poorly
Right,
made.
well,
yeah,
that the last 20 minutes of Fire in the Sky are
definitive alien abduction cinema.
Some of the scariest stuff on film in the 1990s.
The first
I think.
80 minutes are just horrible, though.
Well,
like James Garner.
When you meet Travis Walton, though, I mean that's
I wish
what did it for me.
And Bob Lazar, when you hear him speak, you're like, man, it's hard to not believe this guy. He just doesn't want to be talking to you, and then that adds credibility to it. But for me, I had a moment that just stuck with me as a kid, but at the same time, I'm also very aware that I was a child with a very active imagination. So I kind of immediately, as a child, also wrote it off as that. But I grew up and spent a lot of time in Colorado with my family, and the Trail of Tears had actually gone through our property, and I always sort of had this memory of a Native American ghost hanging out with me while I was sleeping, at night. And I have that vision, but that's again, I was single digits, so it's hard to really say. Maybe I just wanted imaginary friends too, but it wasn't like a friend. It was I was like, oh, is it gone yet? But I have that vision in my brain for sure.
In your bedroom, or just you were
we had this. My sisters and I shared a loft, and they'd be asleep, and I'd look up, and I'd see is that the Indian ghost? It's a whole Native American. Sorry, but
well,
it
that's
was
okay. I mean,
but as a kid, that's not what we called people.
Yes.
So that's the memory I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So probably Cherokee, right?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think
also on the Trail of Tears, it's not like they're going to be like, hey, who's that white guy? Let's make friends.
Yeah,
they're going to strangle him in his sleep.
And I always had exactly. And I always had this vision, that happened to me. But, I'm also kind of skeptical when it comes to those things. I'm I also imagined having hoverboards too, so.
Yeah, but what would be awesome is if you got together with a sketch artist and to see what you recall. Yeah. And then
I draw my uncle. It's that's Uncle, Uncle Steve. That's weird.
Watching me.
Well, at least you'd know then, or match it up with pictures of the time, and see if it looks like it could be a Cherokee person. There might be details in there that you couldn't have known that might surprise
cool.
you.
Yeah, that is cool.
Just an idea, because I'm a person who, has investigated the paranormal for about 20 years now. And I just remember, being so frustrated for so long because there's so much slack out there and nonsense. But then, when you have your own experience, you always have this feeling
a moment of something irrefutable, right? Something
right.
I can't.
Yes. Thank God that's happened to me, because otherwise, with all the crap that's out there that I've had to put up with recently, I would have run the other way into the waiting arms of Richard Dawkins. That's where I was. But
that's why this film was so exciting, though, because there were moments when I'd be like, I can't actually wait. This makes sense to me. Oh God, this makes sense. And it's
Yeah, well, the great thing about this movie is it kind of combines those things, the numinous and the scientific. And, there are very intelligent people who are seriously considering simulation as a possibility. So, I mean, that's
Baku and Sam Harris and Elon Musk, they're all talking about it. Well, don't dismiss that. And
when is Sam Harris?
Yeah, it's
when does he ever get a cameo in a movie? You're like, hey, I'm I was looking at when I was writing down notes I think I put Sam Harris with an exclamation mark. Yeah. I put the Pirate Bay with an exclamation mark too, because it's, of course, like he's looking for something that he can't find, and so he's like, well, I'm just going to go to the Pirate Bay. Like that's what everybody does,
You can relate to the movie that through the Pirate Bay.
right. Complete. Well, it's those little things, and like, there's an Art Bell quote in there. There's a call, and then like I'm like, is that Art's voice, or is that like some like just talking like Art? But it's those kind of things that like the story is powerful in its own way as someone dealing with loss, and I think we all have that kind of feeling where there's things in our past that we wish were different, and the Mandela effect,
or there will be,
there's going to be for
we'll
us.
all be there.
Yes. And it's that idea that, I wish that things were different. And to some people, now they're seeing these little parts in their life that, things were different than how I remembered them. And then how would we go then about kind of figuring out a way to make things more like the better memory?
Yeah. Or it's the inverse. You cherish a memory. You cherish the experience you had with somebody that you may have lost, and you don't want that messed with. You're afraid of that changing or somebody changing it, that precious memory. So it could kind of go both ways. I'd say precious memory. That sounds like, isn't it like a
precious? You're thinking of precious moments.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Precious moments.
That's okay.
I'm about to go.
Okay. You can be a man and say precious. I
just thought I was talking about the figurines or something from.
No.
Yeah.
What we're planning on doing is like everybody on the podcast then gets a little engraved heart necklace. We didn't tell you about that.
Oh.
We get that at Precious Moments. No, but then I like that idea though. The memories you don't want to mess with, but they can be messed with, and also questioning them. We've talked about that a lot on this show because we've talked about alien abduction experiences, and we've talked about Dr. Elizabeth Loftus's experiments with memory. And I had a college friend that worked in her laboratory, and they would do experiments where they tried to inject fake memories into people. Like not inject like with a syringe or whatever, or with pills like on the latest Watchmen, but they would try to, subtly give people fake memories and then see if they would remember them themselves. And they found that just by suggestions or having a line in a diary or something, people would remember things from when they were a kid that never happened, that they could create fake memories in people. And to me, like that fallibility of memory, and that memory is constantly changing, and that you are remember, whether or not we actually live in a simulation, which we totally do, by the way.
I agree.
Whether or not we live in a simulation, it's the idea though that our mind is simulating memory because it's remembering. Sometimes it's remembering how we remember it. If that makes sense, like instead of remembering the actual event, we have our memories of the event, and then our mind is recreating the event in our heads. It's not like a photograph, but it's like a sketch artist redoing it every single time.
Yeah, it's our cachet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what happens then when people watch your film and they have that moment of ennui, that existential crisis? What can you suggest?
Are you guys ready for that kind of responsibility?
Yes. What can you suggest to kind of moderate the ennui or to get yourself out of it? Or, what do we do if we're living in a world of shifting sands? How can you even decide what you're going to have for breakfast?
Well, like one thing that that leads to like I never thought of it that way before, but like one thing I have thought about is like, well, why care anymore if it's all simulated, and there's a scene in the movie where Clark Peters is talking to Charlie. So the doctor is talking to Brendan, and he says, like, do you remember the feeling you had when your daughter was born, the tears on your cheek when she died, like that you get to feel these things should be real enough. Like, it's like, all right, yes, but it could be fake, but it feels real, and that's sort of all that matters. If it didn't feel real, then maybe you would have the questions of like, well, why do I care? But if the illusion's working.
So the authenticity comes from the quality of your emotional reactions.
I think so. I don't know,
Yeah, and I think
that's where I like to think, and if there's any positivity to it, that's it,
And I think we still have. I think we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of forces that would like to put us on rails and not control everything that we do, but certainly guide us. And whether that's just our own consumerism or sort of how we're programmed by social media to behave certain ways, and that can all be exploited. But we still have our own. We're still like self-governing beings. We still make choices. So it's making good decisions as you progress through life, and being aware that there are others that might want to guide you one way or the other, and finding out and learning about yourself, learning what you're susceptible to, and how you can respond as you're confronted with these choices. And so so the main character in this movie is not a robot. He just because he might be in a simulation, he still has his own his own consciousness, his own self-will. Yeah.
So this really could have social implications for people. You're thinking that I really liked what you said about that there are people out there that would control you, or want your dollar, or want want your vote, or want something from you, and you have to be aware of their very real presence in your lives, and make your decisions in life with that in mind. That there are ulterior motives. Find out what those are, inform yourself, and then make decisions based on that.
Well, it doesn't have to be. The ulterior motives don't have to be bad. Like it's not like Skeletor is behind everything. And he's like,
right.
At times it feels like someone's 13-year-old son got into the lab and is just having fun.
Of course.
Like when you're playing a game, you're like, all right, I'm just going to jump out of this plane and see what happens to this character I'm playing. You know what I mean? Like, oh God, not today.
I feel like that when I turn on TV, and now it's like you watch something and you're like, oh my God, Al My Balls from Idiocracy is real.
Yeah.
Like
he's got the controller.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got the controller, and he's like, what are they going to do?
Yes. But Idiocracy has aged really well.
Yeah, Idiocracy.
Well, it's horrifying.
Idiocracy wasn't just it should be a history book, or it's a like a documentary. But the thing is that I like what you said there, though, that we do have our free will. The character, it's in his expression of free will. Instead of, I don't know if it's a spoiler to say that instead of this, it's not like some kind of French New Wave cinema where the main character sees this bigger reality and then just says, well, I have to accept it now, and just goes off in the corner and smokes cigarettes for another 15 minutes. It's, that the character, is driven to agency by seeing the bigger reality. And I mean, I think that's the kind of message where you just said, yes, people are trying to influence our decisions. You guys are trying to influence people's decisions about what to do. You want them to go see the movie. We're trying to influence people's decisions. We want them to listen to a podcast or listen to the songs we write for the podcast, that whole kind of thing. And that's okay. It's just understand that people are trying to not necessarily manipulate us, but they're trying to attract us, and know that I want to go towards the things that enrich and bring value to my life versus the things that just make me and the rest of the world stupider.
Yeah. Take the power back, bro.
Yeah. and part of that, and part of what happens in the film is accepting some of the bad things that come with life. And for that character to grow, I think he had to accept the tragedy that happened. What he perceives as a simulation, try to give that thing he lost back as a way to stop him from moving forward. And
perhaps
it's a little, yeah. I mean, there's different ways to interpret it, but yeah, it dovetails with the conversation.
Yeah, there's ways to interpret it for sure. Yeah.
I mentioned before the Deus Ex Machina, and there's not, there isn't a point I was expecting more as narrative cheating, in the film, and that it was a real delight to not see the narrative cheating, and the kind of the story makes sense from beginning to end, and I wasn't quite expecting that.
Still leaving it a little confusing enough. Like we kind of wanted people to still do like scratch their head and but yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying. So as far as the film goes, it is narratively satisfying in that way that it's not something just magical happens at the end and be like, well, it's magic. Da 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 da. Bye.
Or it was all a dream.
Right. So, no, we do encourage people to check out Mandela Effect, the movie. Now, if you're not in Los Angeles and can make the premiere, like 99% of the United States, how can you see this movie? How can we watch it?
Well, let me tell you what the other cities are, if I have them. Yeah. So if you are in Orlando, San Francisco, LA, Minneapolis, Boston, Philly, Cleveland, Houston, Denver, and Miami areas, go to our social.
That covers a good portion.
Yeah, they'll be in theaters, like one theater in each city for like a week. But honestly, the easiest way, obviously, is just to order it on VOD. It'll be on every VOD service. So if you order movies from your cable provider or from like Apple TV or Amazon, it'll be there. Vudu, your video game machines, same day. So December 6th, it's coming out, and it's gonna It's gonna be a tipping point. Is what everyone is something I'm seeing in the comments of everywhere. Is like, this could be the tipping point. Like, I hope not.
Everybody
Life imitates art.
Where were you on December 6th?
Yeah. I don't know. I apparently some movie I never heard of like shut down the simulation.
No, but it's that kind of thing though. Movies with big ideas give you a chance to, rethink that and also explore more in your own life. And so that's one of the reasons we encourage people to watch movies with big ideas so we can have conversations about them instead of just, talking about who's going to win in a fight, Superman versus Iron Man. Well, they live in different universes though. But what if the simulation combined the universes and then Superman and Iron Man were in the same universe? Like, we could talk about that all day, but it's movies like the Mandela Effect that let us think about the bigger issues than just who's got the better titanium armor or whatnot.
Right.
So we appreciate
talk about the eternal, the essential questions that we all grapple with in life. So that's why we really enjoyed the movie.
So grapple with your Xbox in order to Mandela Effect.
Meta. That's so meta.
Have you guys thought about like the next project or anything beyond that, and also maybe going back to the real life paranormal topic? The well of ideas. Yes, the well
up, pulling up the bucket of
pulling up the body or the girl from the girl from The Ring.
No.
Well, I know Stefan and I are always like drawn to just big ideas. Like, okay, here's the situation. What if? I don't know if we found that idea yet. We're doing a comic book that's being drawn right now that we wrote with a big idea. That's about aliens. But that's all we'll say. It's going to be like another year of drawing because it's a very complex book. But it's written and it's in production. And then as far as film ideas or TV ideas, I think we're still spitballing. Hopefully we have something really interesting. I think we had a lot of fun thinking about material in a way that you have to make it make sense with a big idea. And I think Would You Rather was like, the feet in the shallow end. And this was more of us getting really your whole bodies in there.
Yeah. And I think there's more, we've talked off and on about going back to that well, just as our world has progressed, Would You Rather is still relevant. And there's other stories to tell within that world.
Okay. Did anything happen on set in particular when you guys were working on the Mandela Effect? Did the actors or you guys have any Mandela Effect on the set?
Is there a Mandela Effect curse?
Right.
We lost three children.
Right. We didn't say the actress that plays the daughter. She was the fourth one.
Yeah. I don't have any big moment. Do you?
Or synchronicities. Those are good too.
I'll just say we shot We shot a
he's
lot of the
sitting
house.
on the set of the Mandela Effect as we talk to him right now.
Correct. We shot it in my house.
Oh, wow.
And so watching it
So
after
well
the
lit.
fact has been it's surreal to watch it in the film, to see this other family in place of yours, and
That's Mandela
With your
effect right
family
there.
pictures still.
in
Your
different places
family
than you remember
pictures.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of an ongoing Mandela effect. Every time I watch it, I'm like, oh God, this is kind of spooky.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing about the next project, guys. Good luck with the film. I hope it changes the world, or at the very least gets people to think about some of these topics, and also gets moved. I think people will be moved by the story, and hopefully they'll get moved to think about some of these kind of issues. So if you guys are interested in checking out links to the Mandela Effect, we're going to have those on OthersidePodcast.com 276. So OthersidePodcast.com/276. In case you're listening in your car and you can't wait to get home and watch the movie, just go there and there'll be a link to the different places where you can find it video on demand. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
This was fun.
Mike, Allison, thank you.
Thank you.
For the song this week, we were inspired by the ideas of the Mandela Effect to sing about pain that shouldn't be there, but it is. In the movie, people are wondering how you can remember something that never happened. In phantom limb phenomena, people who have a leg or arm amputated still feel pain from the limb that's no longer there. While there's a scientific explanation for it, neurons in the brain that would usually be sensing those areas are getting stimulated accidentally by the neurons next to them. It's the idea that something impossible is hurting you. Here's our song inspired by the Mandela Effect, Phantom Limb.
Oh man, since you've been gone away, nothing feels the same. Forget a little every day. Sometimes it feels like nothing's changed. My eyes are drawn like a car wreck to an empty chair. Talk to a picture that's been staring at me on my camera phone, and I'll pretend that someone's there. Wake up and the pillow's wet. I call your name in a cold sweat. I wear your face like a faded tattoo. I never learned to cry, but I'll drink until that bottle's dry. I still feel you, my phantom limb, my phantom limb. Sometimes I feel a pain inside, and I'm just left confused, remembering a former life, because there's nothing left to bruise. My eyes are drawn like a car wreck to an empty chair. Talk to a picture that's been staring at me on my camera phone, and I'll pretend that someone's there. Wake up and the pillow's wet. I call your name in a cold sweat. I wear your face like a faded tattoo. I never learned to cry, but I'll drink until that bottle's dry. I still feel you, my phantom limb, my phantom limb, my phantom limb, my phantom limb.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
The Mandela Effect. What a fascinating topic and such a great subject to make a movie about. Hi, this is Wendy. And I just want to thank Mike and Allison, as well as our guests, Stefan and David, for the stimulating conversation today. And if you're interested in learning more about the Mandela effect, you might want to look back at an earlier episode we did on that topic. And that was episode 198, titled The Mandela Effect, False Memories or Parallel Universes. You can find that at othersidepodcast.com/198. We would love to hear any stories you might have about having a memory that didn't quite match reality. So if you have something to share like that, please send it to us either on Twitter at OthersideTalk or just email it to us at show@othersidepodcast.com. We love hearing from you. Finally, I'd like to express our gratitude to the Patreon members who kindly, generously, boldly, bravely contribute to our cause of paranormal education and research here at See You on the Other Side. Our Patreon member Ned gets a bonus hey because he's pledging at an executive producer level. And Ned, thank you so much for that. If you would like to join our community, there are a variety of levels, something for everyone. And you can find out all the information on that at othersidepodcast.com/donate. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have an absolutely awesome week.
George. Come on, George. Clark.
Clark. George said to give you a call.